I've made a fair few Poppy Playtime videos on this channel, and that's partly because it seems to be the only game that does really well, but it's also partly because the game is incredibly interesting and has many things that we can theorize over. But there has been something in the back of my mind ever since my first playthrough of Chapter 2, something that I haven't really made a good theory on until today. In today's video, I'm going to look at how one small detail that nobody seems to have talked about could have huge implications on the story, and it might even fit into the darker theories that I've been coming up with lately. I really do think there is a trend for my theories becoming darker and darker over time, and I think that might be because I'm getting closer and closer to the truth. Either that or my theories are just getting crazier, I'm not sure which. So in Chapter 2, players have a number of games to play through. It's later revealed that these aren't really games, they're more like tests for the orphans in this area, and we can theorize that these tests are to find out exactly who is most suitable for the transfer process from human to doll. But one of these games has a very interesting detail that I haven't seen anyone really talk about yet, and that's most likely because up until this point I don't think there's really been a good solid theory on what exactly it means. So in the musical memory game, which is essentially just a Simon Says game, players are tasked with listening to, memorizing and repeating a set sequence. Now what's really interesting about this is the first few stages of this game are completely random. I know this for a fact because I've played through this game several times now, and every single time I play, I had a very different sequence to memorize. Well, that makes sense, right? If it was the same one every time, it would be super easy. But what's very interesting about this is at a certain point, this stops being random. In fact, there is a point where this game will repeat the same sequence of events every time. I have tested this multiple times and it always seems to be the case. Once you hit a certain level, the sequence becomes as follows: blue, J, heart, orange, pie. Now this is interesting for a number of reasons, but it's actually going to be the backbone of today's theory. There has to be a reason why this sequence suddenly stops being random. The developers chose to put this in for a reason, and I think that's because it does have a secret meaning. Now taken by itself, it doesn't really seem to mean anything. Blue Jay, heart, orange, pie, well, that just seems like a bunch of nonsense. Except if you take my previous theories where I've already theorized one of those words has a different meaning, this entire phrase could actually make sense. I've theorized before that the word orange sounds more like organs, and if we repeat that phrase again, it takes on a whole new meaning. Blue Jay, heart, organs, pie. Now that's already a little bit creepy. If we break this sentence down, there are a number of things that we can point out. First is blue jay being a type of bird. Next we have organs pie being, well, very creepy, but also not exactly out of the realms of possibility, and we're going to come onto that shortly. But if we put these two together, it makes an incredibly creepy sentence. Blue Jay, heart, organs, pie, which we could actually change to Blue Jay loves organs pie. Yeah, it's already starting to take shape. So this already gives me a number of pieces of information that I want to talk about. For a start, what is blue jay? Well, blue jay is a type of bird. You might have guessed it, it's a blue bird. But blue jays, as birds go, are actually very interesting. For a start, they're very aggressive. Does that remind you of anything in this game that's blue and incredibly aggressive? I'll leave that one to you to figure out. But what's more interesting about blue jays is that they're actually very well known for mimicry. They're not the only species of bird to do this, but they are very well known for mimicking the calls of other birds and even humans. They do this to deceive other species of birds. They do this for their own survival, but also so that they can raid their nests. Now if we look at that in a vacuum, well, who cares, right? But if you think about the themes of this game, isn't that exactly what some of these dolls are doing? Some of these dolls have very human voices, but they're not human anymore. They are dolls and we don't know to what capacity they are living or, well, animated, but they aren't human anymore, but they sound like humans. In a way, Mommy Longlegs and Poppy are mimicking humans. So we could say that Blue Jay is like a code name. It represents the people who have been transferred into dolls. They are now mimicking humans just like Blue Jays do. So how does this fit into the sentence then? So these people that are transferred into dolls love organs pie? That sounds a little bit weird to me. But I think, again, this is actually a massive hint as to what's going on in this factory. Think about it, something that we haven't fully explored yet on this channel is the theme of hunger in this game. All the way back in chapter 1 we had hints that hunger was a big component of this mystery. In the vents we can see the word hungry. And we also know that experiment 1006 is noted as not requiring sustenance, possibly hinting that the other dolls in this factory do require sustenance. Which could also explain why so many of these dolls are murdered. Can you murder a doll? I'm not sure, but the idea that they look dead could possibly be because the other dolls are feeding on them. This actually fits into this story so well. We've already talked many times about the idea that Huggy Wuggy has a huge shift in personality, something that Super Horror Bro talked about the darkness overcoming him, and I've also made up my own theories about what could be going on. But one thing that could be going on is that these dolls get hungry, just like we do. But when they get hungry, their more animalistic nature comes out. Again, after all, they're not fully human, they're some sort of doll-human hybrid. We don't really fully know yet, but one possible explanation why Huggy Wuggy seems so friendly at the beginning of chapter 1 and then seems so aggressive at the end of chapter 1 could be that he's just got incredibly hungry. And also the fact that we're carrying a cat bee could be like wafting a burger in front of a hungry dog's face. It's not a good idea. So we have this idea that the dolls get hungry, and when they get hungry, they become aggressive and they eat, well, whatever living organisms they can find, which is in this factory, pretty much just the dolls, maybe the humans. That could also explain the massacre and why all the humans disappeared. They were, well, eaten, which is one very creepy thing if you think about it. But this goes even further, and to try and figure out this mystery, I think we need to look exactly what Playtime Co.'s goals were. And I think that they have two very different and very separate goals. We know that Playtime Co. is a toy factory, and their main goal is to create toys and sell them. It's a pretty normal business practice. You make a product, you sell the product, you make lots of profit, what every business wants to do. But we also know that they seem to have a very different, sinister, and more secret agenda as well. That agenda is the one that we don't quite know. That's the one that involves the orphans and the revival or doll making human hybrid process. I really don't know what to call it at this point because we still don't fully understand it. We can only theorize about what this goal is, but my best guess at the moment is twofold. One, they are trying to bring people back to life in the case of Elliot, or trying to preserve life or trying to stop people from dying, something along those lines. But I think they also have a very secondary goal, which is to make the most lifelike toys possible. And I think this was the original goal all along. If we go back to Poppy Playtime chapter 1, we can see that this person, who I assumed was Elliot Ludwig, although I'm not so sure anymore, this person talks about the most lifelike doll possible, which we know to be Poppy, even though this doll only seems to have a voice box, which, remember, back in the 1960s this might have been a revolutionary technology, but we know that they were trying to make the most lifelike dolls. We know that they somewhat succeeded with their version of Poppy, but as far as I can tell, this version of Poppy was never for sale. So on the one hand, it looks like they're trying to make lifelike dolls to sell. And on the other hand, it seems like they have succeeded, yet they're not selling Poppy. Well, why is that? I think most likely the reason why they're not selling these dolls yet is because they haven't figured out the hunger. The hunger is the main issue. Let's talk about that for a second. So let's just say you make a completely living doll that has the potential to be a huge moneymaker. Imagine selling a doll which is essentially like selling a puppy, except one that never needs to be fed, or doesn't need to go for walks, or doesn't need to do any of the biological downsides of owning a pet. I bet some kids would go absolutely crazy for a doll that could have full conversations and could play with them just like a human being, which, as we know, the process of creating these involves real-life human beings, but that's beside the point. The public wouldn't know that. Playtime Co. got very close to achieving this goal. I think this goal actually would have made them huge amounts of money, as there is no company that could get anywhere close to this level of innovation. They would have the market completely dominated because no other company has this technology. This is their ultimate form of innovation, transferring orphans into dolls to be sold later on as living toys. Again, very dark, but the public wouldn't know that. They would just think it's some magic science or innovation. They would have no clue. And like I said, neither would their competitors. But the problem is they haven't figured out how to stop these toys needing to feed. And that's a big problem for them. Not only would many people be put off the idea of buying a toy that needs feeding, it also raises big questions. Why does my doll need feeding? Why is my doll eating Fido, for example? This is a huge problem for Playtime Co. and something that they are desperately trying to figure out. Something that they actually did figure out with Experiment 1006, but as we know, they never really got to capitalize on that success because 1006 eventually caused the downfall of the factory. So let's just say that all of this theory is true. Playtime Co.'s ultimate goal, their final goal, was to create the most lifelike dolls possible to sell for an insane amount of profit. Something that they were getting quite close to achieving, but once again, they failed because of Experiment 1006 escaping, releasing all of these hungry dolls, everyone got eaten, it was a bad day at the office. But there is one little snag, one little thing that makes this a little bit odd to me, and that is again the phrase Blue Jay Heart Organs Pie. This almost sounds like a psychological trigger to me. It almost sounds like the scientists, or as we'll come on to in a moment, a particular scientist, were trying to embed the idea that this test subject loves organs pie, which if they're trying to stop the dolls from being hungry, seems a very weird thing to do. We know for a fact that the scientists in Playtime Co. are using psychological conditioning, and that actually makes a hell of a lot of sense if they are trying to turn living people into living dolls. They don't want those living dolls coming to their new home and saying, "Hi, by the way, I used to be an orphan and I was transferred into a doll and it was really shady and horrible and I hated it, please help." That would probably put a massive dent in their profit margins. So they use psychological conditioning to maybe convince these people that they are dolls, maybe like a Buzz Lightyear kind of situation. So we know for a fact that they are using psychological conditioning. Why then would they be seemingly conditioning these dolls to want to eat organs pie? Once again, I think there is somebody in Playtime Co. who's not really aligned with the rest of the company, and if I had to give my money, I would put it on Laith Pierre. I've talked previously about my personal theory that Laith Pierre is the big bad in Playtime Co. I think Elliot Ludwig started this company with very pure intentions, but over time, maybe after Elliot died or retired or disappeared or got turned into a doll we don't really know, whatever happened to Elliot, he lost control and somebody took over. And I do think that one of the people that took over was Laith Pierre, and I do think that Laith Pierre is one of the big bads in this series. I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into too much depth, but I do think that Laith Pierre is very paranoid, and I also think there is a potential possibility that Laith Pierre hates children. We know already that Laith Pierre isn't exactly the most pleasant guy to be around and he treats his staff like crap. But something that we haven't really considered is the idea that maybe Laith Pierre just really doesn't like children. Let's just think about that for a second. We know that Laith Pierre seems to be incredibly paranoid. He talks very often about the security of the factory, and we know from Kissy Missy's poster that there is a rule to do not hide behind doors to scare him. I've theorized before that this is because he's very paranoid. And it probably makes sense that him as head of innovation, he's heavily involved in the creation of this orphanage transfer program. So if he's heavily involved, which we know he is, in this highly illegal thing that's happening right below the factory that even most of the staff don't know, it makes sense that he would be highly paranoid. But more to that, think about all these children that they're hiding in Playtime Co. Do you really think that none of them have tried to escape? Do you really think that some of them aren't mischievous and have gone into areas they shouldn't have gone in? We know that there are many vents around this factory, and it's really not beyond the realms of possibility that children get into trouble. They play pranks, they go where they shouldn't do, children are pretty much a nightmare. So this very paranoid man who knows that they have a whole area underneath the factory with hundreds and hundreds of orphans who are pretty much illegally being held there, it's no wonder he's paranoid. And we also know that he's heavily invested in the security systems in the factory. It's entirely possible that he is implementing security measures in the dolls, possibly to stop these children escaping, and if they do, well, dinner is served. But it could go even further than that. I've spoken before that Laith Pierre really seems like a resentful person. The staff bully him, no one seems to like him, and he treats everybody like crap. Well, what if he secretly has been doing his own agenda this entire time? He, as head of innovation, would have access to these tests. What if it was him who was implanting these messages in the test subjects? He was the one making these dolls hungry. He was the one giving them the idea to eat, as I've said, organs pie, which, if you think about it, could just be a substitute for eating people. Why would he do this? Simply to get revenge. Revenge for the staff that constantly play tricks on him. Revenge for the rest of the heads of the company that don't really seem to respect him. Revenge for these children who are constantly causing him problems. Or perhaps revenge on the company as a whole. Once these toys start getting sold, they start to create huge mass problems. They start to eat pets or children or the parents or anybody. It causes a huge outcry and Playtime Co. is done for good. Again, this is all just speculation. I really do think that Lathe Pierre is going to be one of the big bads, but it does seem very interesting that somebody in Playtime Co. seems to be embedding the idea of hunger in these dolls, when it seems like other people seem to be wanting to get rid of the hunger from the dolls. It seems like there are definitely clashes of opinions in Playtime Co., and perhaps this was what started the downfall. Once Elliot was out of the picture, the heads of the factory didn't agree on the direction to go, and the internal politics was what caused the degradation of the security systems and actually allowed the factory to fall in the first place. Well, this was just a pretty fun theory to make, and I'm sure we can come up with different interpretations of why this phrase is in the game, but just know that Blue Jay Heart Organs Pie is definitely a phrase that is in there for a reason. It was chosen to be in there, it's not random like the rest of the game is, and I'm sure it has some significance, even if my interpretation might not be the exact one. So there we go, I hope you did enjoy the vid. If you did, don't forget to give it a like, let me know down in the comments below what you think about this theory, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.